We got patch version 1.40 dropping for Crusader Kings 3 here today, patch Azure, and we're going to be going over that today. As always, I'm going to be upfronting a lot of the knowledge, some of the bigger things that have changed with this patch. That way you can get some kind of down and dirty Spark Notes version of this before we jump into the whole patch notes. So, essentially kind of the summary of what's going on. There were a ton of bug fixes. A lot of the things that were broken about the game or preventing you from actually playing through, stuff that actually made it so, hey, my character died and I couldn't take over for my heir. It just let the game go to game over. Those have been fixed. Another big thing is that you can now individually raise your men-at-arms. So if you say, hey, you know, I just want to raise my men-at-arms at this location, you can now do that via a button. I'll be showing that off in the gameplay portion towards the end of the video. And they've done a whole kind of recalibrating of all of the traits in the game. Some of them will give you important decisions you can add to say like, hey, you know, my character's arbitrary, so I can do certain things that allow me to say, click this decision, and it will wipe away maybe a hook and allow me to do these things. Or if I am diligent, I can increase the growth in my capital at the cost of stress, stuff like that. But in addition, it's made it so that all the other traits that don't have new decisions that were added to them, they now have new bonuses or new penalties that were added to them. So for example, Craven is no longer the terrible trait that it was before, and the same thing with Shy. Shy no longer incurs a ton of stress, but there are some other penalties that you'll incur. Or Greedy is a good example now, where you will get less overall income the lower your stress is. So if you have higher stress, you get more income per month, which is just kind of nuts. So there's a ton of stuff like that. They've also added in some game presets for the difficulties, some character presets. So if you are searching for specific characters, you can save those presets. So for example, hey, you know, it's come a time in my playthrough, I want to just look for unmarried, not ruling adult males to marry off to my courtiers in a matrilineal marriage, or adult females to marry off to my male courtiers. So you can save those presets, so you can just jump into the character finder, click the preset, and just immediately jump into it, which is quite nice. And lastly, one of the other big things is that you can our garrisons themselves now replenish, and it shows a little bar that gives you an idea of how much the garrison has replenished. They're more dynamic now, and on top of that too, there is a new UI for declaring war that makes things a little bit more I guess clear as to what the balance of power is before you jump into war. And actually, the last thing I do want to talk about is they have recalibrated especially the way vassals respond to you, the ruler, or the AI. The whole goal of it was to make it so that you have less of these larger nations like the Byzantine Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, France, so on and so forth, fracturing within the first couple years of the game. And now the AI will take time before it actually starts to provide pressure for the ruler, 1, 5, and 10 year for Duke, King, and Emperor respectively. That'll make it so that you will still see larger, strong nations on the map as you progress through time, so you can actually play through, hey, you know, what if Iceland went toe-to-toe with the Holy Roman Empire? So if you wanted to actually play through that, you'd have to really hope that the Holy Roman Empire remained intact by the time you got big enough to oppose them. Now with this, they have a little bit more cohesion, and the AI will actually kind of, I'd say, better respond to the internal struggles that it has. So that is your quick down and dirty summary of the version 1.4 patch notes. There are tons more to it, and we're going to go through them right now. I'm going to put a link in the description if you'd like to just read them on your own. But if you are heading out, that's all you needed to know, and you want to just bounce now, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. That does help me out so much. It's stupid how much it helps out all the content creators you do watch. But let's jump now into the full patch notes for version 1.4 of Crusader Kings 3. And I've done this like I usually do this. I'm going to be highlighting everything. And again, I always like to give a nod out to this because the first individual I found that does this was One Proud Bavarian when he covered the very first patch for Crusader Kings 3. He showed this off, and I've copied it, and it is an amazing way to show off patch notes. He's also done a patch notes video, so please go and check out his video as well. He's an amazing content creator for all things Paradox, CK3, Victoria 3. I can't give enough props to the guy. He's an amazing dude. Let's jump into some stuff. So anything in green obviously is a positive change. Anything in red is a negative change. Anything in cyan is something maybe I just don't know about, and anything purple is kind of funny. So for the free features, these are kind of like additional content more or less to the game. Game rule presets can now be created. Like I said, you can now easily switch between different configurations depending on your mood. The last configuration is used by default for future games. Now the character finder preset here, this will help with finding spouses, wards, counselors, and I'm going to show this one off in the game itself when we jump into it. You can already hear the game's playing in the background to give us a nice ambiance of music as we swim through these notes. But men-at-arms can be raised independently of levies now, so either to the first existing rally point or from a specific one. It will allow you to crush small rebellions or wage small wars without calling all your levies. At the game start, rulers now start with a decent amount of men-at-arms, which is quite nice. You'll see that too. It's of the 5 available men-at-arms slots I have, it's chosen 4 for me, and they're pretty good. One of them's a siege. I think 2 of them are actually siege equipment, and then I'm sorry, it's 1 siege, 1 archer, and I think 2 light or skirmisher men-at-arms. So it's actually kind of a nice little early game setup for you. Dynamic garrisons for holdings have been introduced. Garrisons now have a max and minimum capacity. When a siege is won, the garrison is depleted and set to its minimum value. Each month, the current garrison reinforces until it reaches its max capacity. The reinforcement rate is improved by upgrading the holding. Now, why this is so cool is, let's say you're doing a war and you're going for broke. You know, you've got 5,000 soldiers. They only have 2,000. You're like, let's just get this over with. You go, you rush their capital, and you're sieging it down. Well, then they rush your capital with their 2,000 soldiers. They take your capital. They don't take you, but still. You now have to finish sieging their capital and go get your capital. It's tedious. And on top of that, if you are guaranteed to just smash them out, you're going to get protracted into a much longer war. Wait, you're going to get pushed into a much more protracted war because of the fact that the garrison immediately replenishes. Now, with the dynamic garrisons, if they take a city and you're immediately you're just crushing through that war, you can go take that city back much faster because it has a smaller garrison. You also have to be mindful of this defensively, because if you take their capital, they now have to deal with a smaller garrison to take it back. So it should create a little bit better of a flow of warfare that isn't such a slog. One thing I've always noticed when it comes to Crusader Kings 3's warfare is that you can get to a point where you're like, man, this is really dragging on, simply because of the amount of time it takes to siege low impact holdings to just push up a war score. So this is nice to see that kind of been balanced out a little bit. In addition, here we have the Monarch's Journey cosmetic items. They have been released now to the public. Jester's hat, Wizard's beards, the Miller highlight, the Jean d'Arc, the Pageboy mullet, and Heenan all can now be accessed for you in the game. And the game will actually have characters use them naturally depending upon who they are, their culture, and so on and so forth. Also, we get some new lifestyle events, one for learning scholarship, one for martial strategy, and an event chain for martial authority, which is quite cool. All of your children now have a kind of meet the peers activity. This activity will allow them to forge relationships with other kids and maybe learn from unexpected situations. Explore a dozen new events from a diverse childhood, allowing you to take control of your destiny, which is nice here. Kind of adds a little bit more playability to the childhood events rather than just simply picking their traits, which is kind of nice. Kind of adds some nice RP elements to the mentoring portion of things. Some traits have access to new interactions and decisions, and we talked about this just to kind of go over a couple here. Arbitrary can remove a hook by paying prestige and gaining tyranny. Wrathful can duel criminals to enforce the punishment. Impatient can take a decision to immediately advance all their ongoing schemes if they're above the stress level 1. Irritable can duel who they want if they are at stress level 1 or above. It will generate dread and tyranny. So they've actually kind of made traits a lot more flavorful, and I'm really, really big on this change. I think this is awesome, just from the interaction and decision standpoint. We're going to push a little forward here into balance, and you'll see that a lot of the other traits that didn't get interactions and decisions got a lot of other nice little tidbits here. So for balance, you can now hire mercenaries of your culture from further away. It will allow Iceland to have access to mercenaries, which is nice. If you guys remember my Uhtred of Bebimba campaign, when we started on Iceland, I realized you could not hire mercenaries. And mercenaries too have been retooled. We're going to go into that later. But the Norman culture now has access to the regional innovation from the Norse culture from the start of the game, which is nice as well. Now, some of the traits here, I've highlighted some of the bigger ones that I think are very important here. So they've all been given kind of additional, it's hard to say traits on the word traits, but all traits now have more traits activated into them. So Craven, for example, added hostile scheme resistance and intrigue. Gluttonous, they have a high chance to avoid being murdered if the poison food method is chosen, which is hilarious. And shy, they do not suffer from stress when starting a personal scheme anymore, but they have a huge penalty on personal scheme power. I feel like that is a very solid benefit, or a swap, right? You're not getting stressed, which can ultimately just destroy your character. You instead have to deal with lower scheme power. I think that's way more thematic than the character just going, oh, I have to meet someone, I've had a mental break. And I know that happens, but still, my point is here, I like that this is like that because it doesn't gate your character when you're playing shy anymore. Too often shy can really gate your character from getting into further portions of the game because it's just, okay, well, I'm barred from really doing anything because I'm just pushing my stress to the limit. And I've already gone through my feasts and my hunts. So this is a really nice kind of counterbalance there. The overall faction dynamic has been updated. The power threshold is more dynamic. It will be decreased by other factions and their state. There will be no factions created by AI vassals in the first years of the game to give enough time to stabilize existing realms. So again, 1 year for dukes, 5 for kings, 10 for emperors. Intimidated characters will not be afraid of joining a faction above their power threshold, and terrified vassals have a small chance of joining a faction above its power threshold. So remember in the past, this was kind of, not reversed, but kind of it had a different effect. So intimidated had a smaller chance, and terrified said they will not join outright. So now it's intimidated will not be afraid, and terrified have a small chance. So the caveat there, though, I guess the counterbalance to it is that characters with an opinion of 80 plus will never join a faction. And that is really strong because it used to have to be, okay, they were terrified of you, they would never join a faction. They were a child, they'll never join a faction. They're a friend of yours, they'll never join a faction. Now you just simply have to get their opinion above 80, and that's nice because you might not be going down a branch that allows you to do befriend, which really bars people from joining factions. You can now just rely on that 80 opinion. You can even buy the opinion if you need to. So very nice way to kind of balance this, but at the same time, make it so that intimidated and terrified vassals and characters can still really threaten your realm if you're not too careful. Moving into independence faction modifiers, they've also been updated, so electors are less likely to join or create a faction. Vassals that have more than 50% of their territory outside of the de jure primary title will be more likely to join or create the faction. The bigger their realm size, the more likely they are, and counts are less likely to join a faction, and kings are more likely. So those wayward kings you must be wary of, especially if they have a big realm that is 50% outside of your primary title. That can be kind of scary. So independence factions have been that retooled, but claimant faction as well has been retooled here. Powerful vassals are more likely to create claimant factions if they have a negative opinion, and vassals with a different culture are more likely to join than before. Further, characters are more likely to join a faction if the claimant is their de jure liege, and then characters are more interested in claimant factions concerning title above their and in their de jure hierarchy. Now, why these two things are so important is that it will greatly change the general upheaval of the game. It'll make it so that you have to really monitor your vassals a lot closer and a lot better. It kind of gets to a point when you're playing Crusader Kings 3 before this, that as long as you kind of made people happy enough, or you just kind of were a tyrant about things, you don't really have to worry about much. But now things are really a lot more widespread. like I said, characters are more interested in a claimant faction concerning title above there and their de jure hierarchy, and if it's their de jure liege. So there are so many more factors now going into claimant factions and independence and even overall faction dynamics. So this should make for you controlling a larger realm to be much harder, and that is good. The intention for Crusader Kings 3, I think we all want to paint the map, but the intention has always been that you have to deal with succession issues and you have to deal with vassals that are vying for power, and this really kind of ramps that up. So I'm excited to see how this plays out. Faiths with concubines no longer give counts a prestige penalty for not having them, and now only expect dukes to have 1 rather than 2, which is quite nice, because that is another big thing. Yeah, we don't all want to have succession issues, and sometimes you just have 15 kids with one wife. So this kind of makes it you don't have to jump through so many loopholes with concubines and force those issues of succession onto yourself. Even though I just said that's kind of it's kind of like one of the big things of the game. That's the way it was in history, right? You take a look at the crowns of Spain. Every single major king had 3 kids and divided it up to those 3 kids. Those 3 kids fought and made 1 crown, and then he had 3 kids. So it just is the same thing throughout history. So it just kind of is here or there. But founding the capital of the Rus now gives a more mild development level boost, as well as a reasonably hefty boost over time, rather than immediately catapulting you to Constantinople levels. Increase the amount of money everyone starts the campaign with by 50%, which is nice. And the Scandinavian adventures have had quite a few retooling here. They now stagger their attacks through the year instead of ritually attacking on January 1st. They'll stop consistently starving to death at sea before they reach their target, which is huge. And event men-at-arms are now inheritable, which is great. So if you are doing an adventure and your adventurer dies, his next of kin will take on those men-at-arms. The cost of mercenaries, like I said, this has been retooled a bit. The cost of mercenaries and holy orders now slowly goes up based on the size of your realm, which is great. The cost of mercenary now increases with the tier of the primary title with each era. Now, why this is great is it's good for the AI, because the AI can just kind of like randomly whip up a ton of mercenaries, and you're like, wow, I didn't expect to deal with 8,000 mercenary troops. But it's also nice because it makes mercenaries less of a cop-out even for you as a player. You have to play a little bit smarter, and I do like that because I myself have even done this. I've been like, well, I'll just pop up some mercenaries right here and be done with it. So if you do want to use mercenaries, there is a much larger impact on things. Now for the AI, there's been a lot of changes here, but I'm just going to highlight a couple. Told the AI that it shouldn't be avoiding running into stronger enemies when it's explicitly trying to help out one of its own units dealing with stronger enemies. Told the AI that just because it cannot fit its entire army in a single province, that doesn't mean it should stop resupplying. And told the AI that just because its units are in a separate stack, that doesn't mean it shouldn't help out in combat. It is losing 2 provinces away. So the AI should be a little less static on the map now. It should actually try to jump into fights that it knows it can tip the balances in, and less of like, oh, I'm going to play it safe, I'm going to wait over here. It'll also, this is a nice one I should have highlighted, told the AI to keep its stacks a bit smaller so that it has an easier time resupplying. No more are you going to see these 10,000 army doom stacks rolling around the board. Say like I'm playing Warhammer. You should see things split up a little bit more so that you'll see more armies moving from one nation and less of one huge big chunk moving down the map. Moving into interface, the declare war window, which I'll be showing off in a bit, has been restructured to allow for a better comparison between the 2 sides and ease the access to the objectives attached to a casus belli, which is quite nice. If someone is your ally in a war, your enemy at the same If someone is your ally in a war and your enemy at the same time, they now show as your enemy, since walking into them will cause combat. This does not solve the underlying issue of conflicting wars being possible in rare cases, though. So I've highlighted it in red because it still is a little bit of an issue, but they have done what they can to try and fix it. Fix an issue that could cause numerous duplicate interaction notifications to appear, and I've definitely had that occur, and that has been alleviated quite a bit here. Now for game content, again, I put things in cyan that I'm not too 100% sure of, but they're here nonetheless. Defenders of Rod now require a holy site without an existing special building. That seemed a little fishy to me, so that's why I put that there. Courtiers who carry a rotting trophy now give off an off-putting smell. You know, that shouldn't be cyan. That's just funny. So purple it is. Poet trait now has a runestone memorialization, which is nice. Raised voices at the Ting meet event now has several issues rather than literally always being the same squabble. And Scandinavian adventures may now be paid off or given land preemptively rather than always needing to be fought to the end, which is really cool. When you look at the history of the Normans, they landed in France, started attacking everything, Paris, so on and so forth. And the King of France told, Rollo, hey, just take this land over here, please stop attacking. And that became Normandy, the land of the Normans, the land of the Vikings. And that's how you get Vikings, or that's how you get Normans. So it's a really kind of cool ode to that, and the ability to just pay them off, like if you are the Byzantines who just paid off any opposition a lot of the time. So cool little tidbit there, and it helps to kind of balance out a lot of the Scandinavian adventures that are popping off all over the map and can really dissolve a lot of the stronger nations, like again the Holy Roman Empire. But winter commanders can now auto win at competitive skiing, because I didn't think you wanted that, but it's there now. But Dynast can now enforce a divorce or ask a divorce for any member of their dynasty within their realm, which is quite nice. And added a new piety icons for Zoroastrianism and Judaism. And Olympus replaces Sparta as holy site for Hellenism. I just wanted to highlight that. A ton of stuff for user modding. I don't understand any of it, but it's there. So if you mod, please go look at that. And to wrap us up here, we've got some bug fixes. Populous factions can no longer usurp a player's primary title if it is their only title of their tier. Removed occurrence of game over despite having an heir. Again, we talked about that a second ago. Elective heir from primary title sets only for the title and doesn't affect others. Succession is tied to each title individually, so that changing succession in one doesn't affect other titles. And this kind of like line right here, succession is tied to each title, is so huge to kind of understand, because that is why succession tends to be such a hard thing to really grasp and get underneath with this game, is because succession is tied to each title, these little bugs and stuff like that occur, and it's easier to understand it as soon as you kind of get that locked in. But elective heir from primary title sets only for the title and doesn't affect others. So primary title. So if your primary title is king, the duke titles still fall under succession. Moving into fixed hiring a holy order, charging you piety in cases where the interface tells you it would be free. Fixed the straight medium beard and straight pointy beard missing from the barbershop, because I am a man who has a beard, and that is pinnacle in any game I play. Forbid a Scandinavian adventurer to start a war against someone if they have a truce with one of their liege, which is huge. Scandinavian adventurers can get out of control. Securing the High Kingdom of the North Sea now requires you to hold the relevant kingdom titles, not just any randomer. Bubonic plague will now only occur after 1346. Arabic high nobility will now use the scholars' turbans, and caliphs will now use the caliphal robes. Updated or upped the likelihood for the Grandmaster of the Jomsvikinga to rip their shirt off and come at you for your impiety and assorted faults. This also upped it for the harass anyone who isn't an unreformed Norse pagan, which was supposed to be the way that this was actually built originally, and it wasn't working that way. So it's now is working as intended. When revoking a title, the acceptance modifier from the military strength is clamped to 20, so you can't like artificially inflate that above 20 anymore, because you have just a staggering military strength, which is, in my opinion, nice. I like when they kind of put those little balances on things. Armies won't suffer from starving penalty when the army is not using supplies, which is huge. That was actually killing off people's armies in droves. Logistician traits now affect supply duration at sea and in friendly territories. And lastly, participants of a civil war can now all be punished without incurring tyranny, which is lovely. In case of white peace, they can only be imprisoned and their titles revoked, and in case of being defeated, they can also be banished or executed. So that is a nice bug update there, or bug fix right there. So plenty of stuff here added or fixed or changed with version 1.4, but let's quickly jump into the game to show off some of those things. Okay, so we started a brand new Apulia campaign just to show off some stuff here. We're starting with 105 gold, a little bit more than normal. And if we jump over here into military, you can see that these are the men-at-arms that we started the game with. So 2 units of pikemen, I'm sorry, I said skirmishers, 2 units of armored footmen, and then 1 unit of mangonels. That's a pretty nice little setup right there. That way we have a lot of really nice fighting ability right out the gate, and I can press raise all men-at-arms right here, and it's going to raise just my men-at-arms, not my 1685 levies. So it's cool to see this kind of brought into the military screen. A lot of people have requested this and wanted this, rather than trying to cheat the system by saying, hey, raise everything, your men-at-arms raise first, and then just stop them from mustering. This has been changed in 1.3 where that isn't the case anymore, and now in 1.4 we can just raise men-at-arms, which is quite nice. Moving into another military thing, let's go ahead and click on our building, and we can see this is the garrison. It's at 285 of 287, and we can see the bar that shows its overall replenishment, so we see that it's pretty much all the way there. Another military thing I want to talk about is the ability to take a look at a better... Oh, I guess I can't... Oh, I have got to spam that first. Now we'll do it. You can see this looks a lot nicer. I can even see our money balances here. I can see the little flag that tells us that their military strength is inferior to ours. And we get just a nice readout of everything, allies and everything. So let me actually choose Syracuse. And if I just go Holy War for County, choose an objective, it just looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer. Again, I get a nice balance of everything. And click this and just kind of choose another one really fast, other than having to go back and forth all the time. I don't think I can do one with, I was trying to see a larger location, but looks like for the most part, I think we can do this. Yeah, so the military strength is similar to ours. I just wanted to find a different flag to show off that it shows that same flag that you got before, just a little bit nicer, a little bit neater, a little bit easier to understand when it comes to declaring wars. So one of the other things I want to look at here is real quick our traits. Remember what we were saying for greedy? So now monthly income is increased by 5%. Which is smaller than it was before. I believe previously it was either 10 or 15%, but now monthly income per stress level increases by 10%. So if you're at stress level 3, well, that's 30% increase to your monthly income. You're teetering on the edge, but at least you've got that 30% bonus. Ambitious here would give you a decision, as well as arbitrary, which unlocks the dismiss hook interaction, an interaction allowing you to dismiss a hook targeting you in exchange for prestige. So a nice little bonus and boons there for a lot of these individual traits. Quite nice. But let's take a real quick look at the character new filters, the presets. So I'm going to say, let's take a look at female, unmarried, not ruler individuals for my court to marry into. So let's go ahead and click all within my diplomatic range. Ruler, we'll go not ruler, adult, and female. So these are all of my candidates to marry my courtiers off to. And I want to save this because I'm going to probably want to use it multiple times in my playthrough. So I click Save Filters. I can then type in unmarried female. And I have my unmarried male one already. So let's close this, go to Select Saved Filter Preset, and I can just bounce back and forth between these two. It's a huge boon because I use this menu all the time, and it is so tedious to just jump through all these things all the time. Go, okay, click. Oh, I forgot to set this one. Like, at least this way I know I can do it once at the beginning and it's done. So it's nice to have that ability kind of locked into the game, and then I can just reset to default if I so wish. It's a really nice little boon for Crusader Kings 3. So this kind of covers all of the big things that were added here in 1.4 Azure, guys. I'm really excited to play this one out as we jump into some of the stream ideas I've got. So if you want to see those, go ahead and vote on the community portion of my page. It's either between the Reformation of the Roman Empire, we'll be playing through and creating the Roman Empire of antiquity, or the Outremer Empire, the over the seas empire that was started here with the Crusader kingdoms. So go ahead and vote on that in the community tab here. But As always, thank you so much for watching here today. If I forgot any of the bigger patch notes that you would love to make sure are highlighted, please, please, please go ahead and leave a comment below. Some things I glossed over maybe because I didn't understand them or whatever. And again, I know that both H for Havoc and I said H for Havoc and I almost said B for Bavaria. H for Havoc and One Proud Bavarian both covered the patch notes. So please go ahead and check them out if you want a differing viewpoint on some of these 1.4 patch notes. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.